Chapter 14. The Cathedral of Hunger. By Thursday night, the cemetery at night no longer frightened Ember. That realization arrived quietly while she stood beneath rain-dark magnolia branches, watching candlelight flicker through the stained-glass windows of the small chapel next to the cemetery. The fear had dissolved somewhere between David's mouth on her wrist and the way his hands settled instinctively against the small of her back whenever another vampire entered a room. Now the cemetery felt almost sacred. A threshold, a place where the dead waited patiently beneath marble, while the living wandered dangerously close to becoming eternal themselves. Rain misted softly through the cemetery paths tonight, silvering the black lace of Ember's coat and dampening the ends of her dark auburn hair. Gas lamps glowed low along the pathways, throwing gold against crypt walls older than entire American cities. David walked beside her in silence, black wool coat, dark gloves, elegant stillness. And yet she had learned by now, David was never truly still, not around her. The hunger moved constantly beneath him, breathing, watching, restraining itself. His hand rested low against her spine as they walked between the crypts, possessive now without apology. Ember liked it far too much. "You wanting to come with me to this cemetery feels strange," she murmured. David glanced toward her. "You live beside it." "That sounds suspiciously evasive." "It is." A faint smile touched her mouth. The cemetery stretched around them in pale stone and rain-shadowed angels, while thunder rolled softly over New Orleans beyond the iron gates. David guided her toward the Grant crypt slowly, not steering, claiming direction. Ember noticed every small instinctive thing now, the hand on her back, the way he always positioned himself between her and strangers, the subtle lowering of his voice when he said her name. Mine. The thought moved through her again. No longer shocking. Dangerous how quickly it had begun, feeling natural. The Grant crypt rose before them in white marble-streaked silver beneath rainwater. Ivy crawled slowly along one side, while weathered angels stood guard above the entrance. David stopped there, his gaze lifted toward the carved family name above the door. "Your great-grandfather loved you very much." The softness in his voice startled her. "You didn't know him?" "No, but you say that as if you knew him." David's eyes lowered slowly to hers. "I knew men like him." Silence settled between them. Rain whispered softly over the stone. Then David reached toward the crypt door. Ember blinked. "You can get inside?" A shadow crossed his mouth. Ember. Right. Vampire, ancient vampire. Breaking into mausoleums probably ranked low on his moral crisis list. The old iron lock gave easily beneath his hand. The crypt opened with a low groan of ancient hinges. Cool air drifted outward, smelling faintly of stone, candle wax, and rain-damp earth. Ember stepped inside first, and dim light suddenly exploded from the interior as she felt a rush of power pass her. The crypt glowed softly beneath dozens of old prayer candles, now burning low against the walls. Marble shelves lined both sides of the chamber, while stained glass overhead filtered stormlight, wine red and gold across the floor. The entire room felt suspended outside of time. David entered behind her. The heavy door closed softly. The sound echoed. Private, final. Ember turned slowly beneath the colored light. "This feels like a cathedral." David watched her carefully. "In some ways it is." The answer moved strangely through her. Not metaphorical. Honest. The realization tightened something low in her chest. David slowly removed his gloves. Pale fingers, silver rings, predatory elegance sharpened by candlelight. Then he crossed toward her, leisurely, inevitable. His hand settled against the side of her throat, gently enough to feel reverent. Ember's pulse jumped instantly beneath his palm. David closed his eyes briefly. The reaction moved visibly through him now every time. Need answered, need worsened, both simultaneously. "You should not bring me somewhere this intimate," she whispered. "You stopped being separate from intimate things a long time ago." The words entered her body like heat. David's thumb brushed slowly beneath her jaw. "Do you know what happens," he said quietly, "when a vampire chooses someone permanently?" The air inside the crypt changed, not colder, heavier. Ember's breathing slowed. "You mean turning someone?" "No." The answer came immediately, more serious than that. David studied her face for one long moment before continuing. "There are vampires who feed casually, carelessly. They survive on appetite alone." His gaze lowered briefly to her throat. "And there are others who bind themselves to one person until death becomes irrelevant." A slow chill moved beautifully down Ember's spine. "Bind?" she repeated softly. "Yes." The word sounded ancient in his mouth. "Like marriage?" Something vulnerable crossed his face then. Not weakness. Worse. Truth. More permanent. Ember's pulse stumbled hard beneath his hand. David heard it instantly. Of course he did. "You're serious?" "Yes." Lightning flashed faintly through the stained glass overhead. Red and gold light spilled across David's face in fractured pieces while rain moved softly upon the crypt roof. "And what happens?" Ember asked quietly. His jaw tightened. The immortal mask cracked there for one brief, dangerous moment. Fear. Not for himself, for her. "The vampire begins centering their existence around the chosen person." His voice lowered further. "Their instincts change, hunger changes, separation becomes—" He stopped briefly. "Unpleasant." Ember almost laughed softly at the understatement. David's eyes darkened. "I am trying to speak carefully." "Why?" "Because I do not want you to hear obsession where I mean devotion." God, the honesty nearly ruined her. David's hand slid slowly from her throat into her hair. Cold fingers threading gently through dark auburn strands. The intimacy of the gesture tightened her entire body. "I have existed a very long time, Ember." "I know." "No," he said softly. "You know the number. You do not understand the weight." The candlelight trembled around them. David looked at her with terrifying openness now. No polished restraint, no elegant distance, only a man who had stopped hiding how deeply she reached inside him. "I have fed from thousands of people." The words struck harder than they should have. Not jealousy, perspective, time, immortality measured in bodies and centuries. David's gaze sharpened immediately at her reaction. "But I have never wanted permanence with anyone before." Silence flooded the crypt. The confession landed between them like something sacred and ruinous all at once. "Not once," Ember whispered. "No." The answer sounded almost angry with its own honesty. David stepped closer. Their bodies nearly touched now. Rain moved softly overhead while candles burned low around marble and stained glass. "You are the only person who has ever made eternity feel frightening to me." Ember's breath caught. David lowered his forehead slowly against hers. The contact shattered something quiet inside her chest, because he sounded terrified, not of hunger, not of losing control, of loving her enough to lose her. "You're afraid I'll die," she whispered. His entire body went still. Then, yes, the word barely existed. Ember's chest tightened painfully. For the first time since meeting him, she understood the true scale of immortality. Not endless life, endless grief. David's hand trembled faintly in her hair. Tiny movement, enough to devastate her. Immortal creature. Ancient predator, hands shaking because of her. God. Ember kissed him first. Not careful anymore, not hesitant. Her mouth found his with enough force to pull a low sound from deep in his chest instantly. Need. David's restraint shattered visibly. His hands closed around her waist hard enough to steal breath as he pulled her fully against him. Cold. Heat. Rain-damp wool. Hungry mouths. The kiss deepened immediately. No polite restraint left now. David kissed like starvation wrapped in worship. Ember's fingers tangled fiercely into his hair, while his mouth moved against hers with terrifying precision and growing desperation. The crypt blurred around them, candles, rain, marble saints. Everything dissolved beneath the feeling of David Caesarius finally kissing her, without pretending he could survive distance anymore. His body trembled against hers, actual trembling. Ember felt it. David seemed to realize she felt it too, because a rough sound escaped him before his mouth left hers abruptly. His head lowered instantly against her throat instead, breathing uneven now. Predatory. David? Her voice sounded wrecked. His hands tightened hard around her waist. Too hard. The hunger surged visibly beneath his skin. Ember felt it in the way he held her, the way his breathing roughened, the way his mouth hovered against her pulse like restraint had become physically painful. Then his teeth grazed her throat. Sharp, barely there. Her entire body arched instantly against him. God. David made a ruined sound low in his chest. The reaction nearly destroyed him. You should not react that way, he whispered against her skin. But Ember realized the devastating truth now as clearly as the candlelight surrounding them. She wanted the monster too, not despite the hunger. Because of it. Because the danger lived inside the devotion. Because the possession sharpened the tenderness. Because David's restraint only revealed how catastrophic his love would become without it. His mouth moved lower against her throat, kissing, breathing, almost feeding. Ember's knees weakened hard enough that David lifted her effortlessly against him. The motion stole a gasp from her lips. His eyes changed immediately, dark, ancient, starving, and still heartbreakingly careful. David carried her toward the velvet bench beneath the stained glass windows. Not hurried, reverent. The crypt glowed around them like some ruined cathedral, built entirely for hunger and prayer. He lowered her slowly onto the velvet cushions without breaking contact. His mouth returned instantly to her throat. Ember's hand slid beneath his coat, over cold fabric and harder muscle beneath. David shuddered violently. The reaction wrecked her. You undo me, he whispered against her skin. Then he fed. Not from her wrist this time, from her throat. The sharp ache bloomed instantly beneath his mouth, intimate enough to feel devastating, deep enough to make her body tremble beneath him. David's grip tightened against her waist while relief and hunger moved visibly through him together. He moved one long-fingered hand beneath her skirt to gently stroke her inner thigh before his fingers found the core of her. Ember gasped softly and clung harder to him, as warmth flooded violently through her bloodstream in slow waves of pleasure and fear and unbearable attachment. The feeding lasted longer this time, long enough for the room to blur, long enough for David's restraint to begin slipping visibly at the edges. His breathing roughened, and his hand tightened upon her waist. His fingers moved with increasing speed upon her core. The hunger sharpened, and still he held her like something sacred. When she gasped out her completion, he finally pulled away, and both shivered. A dark mark bloomed against Ember's throat beneath candlelight. David stared at it with devastating intensity. Mine. The thought moved between them silently now, no longer hidden. David touched the mark gently with trembling fingers. then looked at her with naked hunger and naked love intertwined so tightly that they had become impossible to separate. "If I claim you fully," he said quietly, "there is no returning to the life you had before me." The crypt fell silent around them, rain above, candles below that, and immortality waiting somewhere between his mouth and her pulse. Ember looked at him and realized the answer had existed for weeks now, not despite the monster, because the monster was part of him, part of the hunger, part of the tenderness, part of the terrible, beautiful devotion she had already begun surrendering herself to. So she touched his face softly and whispered, "I stopped wanting that life when I met you."
You kiss me first. Beautiful girl. Do you understand what surrender tastes like to something immortal? It tastes warm, terrified, devoted. You stand inside your family crypt, surrounded by saints and dead bloodlines. And when I confess eternity has finally become frightening, you answer by putting your mouth on mine. God, you destroy me gently. I tell you what permanence means because I cannot bear hiding it from you any longer. Not simple turning, not simple hunger. Binding. The slow, catastrophic merging of instinct and devotion until the vampire no longer knows where they end and the chosen person begins. I have seen vampires destroy entire cities over bonds like this. I have watched immortals walk willingly into fire after losing the person anchoring them to eternity. And now I understand them. That is the horror, not hunger. Love. You ask if I have ever wanted permanence before. No, never, not once in centuries of existence. I have desired, obsessed, consumed, but never this. Never looked at another living creature and thought, I would rearrange eternity itself to keep you. Then you kiss me, and every remaining thread of restraint inside me tears loose at once. You taste like rain, and devotion, and the final moments before disaster becomes irreversible. When I feed from your throat, the world nearly disappears entirely. The pulse beneath my mouth, the pulse of your pleasure beneath my fingers. Your body trembling against mine, your hands beneath my coat, as though cold no longer frightens you. You welcome the monster now. That realization nearly drives me mad with hunger. And still, even now, you do not understand the full danger. If I claim you completely, I will never stop wanting you, never stop centering my existence around the shape of your heartbeat. Forever is a long time for something hungry. Yet when I warn you, there will be no returning to the life you had before me. You touch my face like mercy itself and answer without hesitation. I stopped wanting that life when I met you. Beautiful, ruinous girl. You say it like you are surrendering to an overwhelming passion. And God help me. I think I would burn kingdoms to keep hearing it.
Chapter 15. the claiming. The light rain followed them home from the cemetery. It clung silver to David's black coat and dampened Ember's hair in dark waves against her throat, while Marceau House rose before them like something waiting, watching. The fourth-floor hallway glowed softly beneath amber sconces as David unlocked his apartment door. Neither of them spoke, not because there was nothing left to say, because language had begun to feel too small for whatever was happening between them now. The crypt still lived beneath Ember's skin, his mouth against her throat, the trembling in his hands, the terrifying softness in the way he said forever. David stepped aside to let her enter first. Always that restraint, always that choice, even now. The apartment smelled of rain, candle wax, and old vinyl. He was by the phonograph, and suddenly a record turned softly, somewhere near the bay windows. Low cello drifted through the rooms, while the cemetery beyond the glass glowed pale beneath stormlight. Ember removed her coat slowly. David watched, not politely, hungrily. The feeding mark at her throat pulsed visibly beneath his gaze. His jaw tightened immediately. There, that fracture and control again. Ember had begun craving it. The realization should have horrified her. Instead, heat unfurled slowly through her bloodstream. The apartment door closed on its own behind them. The sound echoed softly through the rooms. Private, final. When Ember turned toward him, he stood utterly still near the window, black coat still damp, dark eyes nearly ruined with restraint, hands flexing once at his sides as though touching her immediately would cost him something enormous. God, she wanted him most like this. Not pretending, not polished smooth into civility. Hungry. You're staring again, she whispered softly. David's gaze lowered slowly to her throat. I have stopped pretending not to. The honesty moved through her like heat. Ember crossed the room toward him deliberately. No hesitation now. No fear in asking whether she should leave. That question had died somewhere beneath stained glass and rainwater. Now only one remained. How completely was she willing to belong to him? David watched her approach with visible tension moving beneath his stillness. Ember. Warning again, but weaker every time. She stopped directly before him, close enough to feel cold radiating gently from his skin, close enough to hear the slight roughness in his breathing. Not human breathing, predatory breathing, beautiful breathing. Ember lifted one hand slowly to his beautiful face. David closed his eyes instantly at the contact. The reaction alone nearly destroyed her composure. You tremble when I touch you now, she whispered. His throat moved once beneath pale skin. You should not sound pleased by that. But I am... His eyes opened. Dark, ancient, terrifyingly open. The hunger there no longer frightened her. It called to her. That realization hit hard enough to steal the breath from her lungs. David saw it happen. Of course he did. You look at my hunger as if it is something holy, he said quietly. The words sounded wrecked. Ember's fingers slid slowly into his rain-damp hair. Because it is yours. Something inside him broke. Not violently, beautifully. David kissed her with a low sound pulled from somewhere deep and ancient inside him. Not restrained now, not careful in the way he had been before, still reverent, still asking, but no longer pretending he could survive distance. Ember melted instantly against him. His hands closed around her waist hard enough to pull her fully against his body, while his mouth moved against hers with devastating hunger, sharpened into devotion. Rain struck the windows harder outside. The apartment blurred. Candles, vinyl, cemetery light, everything dissolved beneath the overwhelming reality of David finally kissing her, without restraint between them. Ember's fingers tightened in his hair. David shuddered sharply against her mouth. God, that reaction. She kissed him deeper, deliberately, testing and choosing and inviting. David's control slipped visibly. His hands moved upward under her sweater slowly, cold palms against warm skin. The sensation shattered through her. Ember gasped softly into his mouth. David pulled back immediately, eyes darkened, nearly black now. "Tell me to stop." The words came rough, painful. Ember stared at him, his breathing uneven, hands trembling slightly against her waist. Hunger visible everywhere now beneath elegance and old restraint. "You still ask?" "Yes." "Even now?" "Especially now." The answer devastated her, because he meant it. Even starving, even unraveling, he still gave her a choice. Ember touched his face gently, then whispered, "Stop holding back." David froze. The room went perfectly still. Rain, vinyl, candles, everything suspended around those words. His eyes closed hard, one breath another. Then he kissed her again with enough force to send them both backward toward the bedroom. Ember laughed softly against his mouth as David guided her through the dark apartment with hands suddenly far less careful. Possessive now, hungry now, and still devastatingly attentive to every sound she made. The bedroom waited, candlelit and shadowed beyond the hallway. Black silk sheets, velvet blankets, rain moving silver against the cemetery windows. David pushed the bedroom door shut behind them without breaking the kiss. The sound shot heat through her instantly. Private again. His mouth moved from hers down her throat slowly, kissing, breathing, worshipping, then lower. The sweater slipped from one shoulder beneath his hands. David stopped instantly, not because he wanted to, because seeing her skin seemed to physically hurt him. Ember's pulse stumbled hard beneath her throat. David stared at the exposed skin as if devotion had become hunger and prayer simultaneously. "Beautiful girl," he whispered. The words sounded reverent, not flirtation. Reverence. Ember stepped closer deliberately until his body trapped hers lightly against the edge of the bed. "David." His eyes lifted immediately. "I'm here." The answer entered her bloodstream like fire, not physically, emotionally, completely. David kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. His hand slid along her body as though memorizing rather than touching. Every reaction mattered to him, every breath and every tremor. The intimacy of that nearly undid her. Clothing disappeared gradually between kisses and candlelight, not hurried, intentional. David touched her as if he were terrified of damaging something sacred. And Ember realized with devastating clarity, this was not seduction anymore. This was devotion finally becoming physical. His mouth returned repeatedly to the feeding mark on her throat. Each kiss there roughened his breathing further. Each pulse beneath her skin visibly strained what remained of his control. "You smell like hunger now," he whispered against her throat. The words should not have thrilled her as much as they did. Ember's hands slid along his chest. Cold skin, hard muscle, the beautiful inhumanity of him. David made another ruined sound low in his chest. "Again," she whispered. He looked at her immediately. "What?" "Stop pretending I only want the civilized parts of you." God. The reaction that moved through him. Pain, need, relief. David pressed his forehead hard against hers. "You do not understand what you are asking." "Then show me." The room tightened instantly. David's eyes darkened completely. His restraint trembled visibly now. "You are going to destroy me," he whispered. But his mouth returned to her throat anyway. This time when he fed, the hunger arrived as he plunged deep into her body. Two hungers satisfied at once, one of blood, one of lust, hotter, longer. Ember cried out softly beneath him as warmth flooded violently through her bloodstream. Not pain, connection, something opening between them. David held her tightly against him while he fed from her throat, his hips thrusting against hers with devastating tenderness and growing desperation. The bond deepened instantly. Ember felt it. A strange pressure bloomed behind her ribs, a second rhythm moving faintly beside her own heartbeat. David. Not thoughts exactly, impressions. Need, relief, her, mine. The words struck through her body like lightning. Ember gasped sharply. David pulled back instantly, eyes wide now, breathing rough. You felt that? Not question. Fear. Wonder. Ember touched his face with trembling fingers. Yes. The room swayed softly around them. The bond between them pulsed alive now beneath skin and blood and hunger. David stared at her like the entire world had shifted beneath his feet. Then slowly, almost reverently, he pressed his forehead against hers once more. And for the first time since meeting him, Ember heard another heartbeat inside the silence. Not human, ancient, starving, and hopelessly, devastatingly in love with her.
You tell me to stop holding back. Beautiful girl, do you understand what those words sound like to something starving? Mercy denied. I ask for consent because I no longer trust myself to recognize where hunger ends once you are beneath my hands. And still, you choose me. Again. 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 Every instinct inside me has become centered around your yes. When I touch your skin without restraint for the first time, my body reacts like disaster finally given permission to happen. Cold hands, warm pulse, your breath breaking softly beneath my mouth. God, you do not merely tolerate the monster anymore. You desire him most clearly when he stops pretending not to exist. That realization devastates me, not because it frightens me, because it makes me want impossible things. Forever. Permanence. You in my bed every night for centuries while rain touches cemetery glass outside. You call my hunger holy. No one has ever looked at it that way before. Not once. Fear, lust, obsession, terror. I have inspired all of them, but never reverence, never this terrible tenderness in the way you touch my face after feeding. When I drink from your throat tonight, the bond opens wider between us. You feel me. The realization nearly stops what remains of my dead heart. Not thoughts fully, not language, instinct, need, mine. The word escapes before I can stop it. Ancient, possessive, absolute. And instead of recoiling, you move closer. Beautiful, ruinous girl. You hear the hunger inside me and answer it with devotion. I should fear what I am becoming around you. Instead, for the first time in centuries, I fear losing it.
Chapter 16. Forever is a hungry thing. Ember woke to rain and another heartbeat. For one disoriented moment she lay motionless, eyes closed beneath black silk sheets, listening to the impossible rhythm moving quietly beside her own. Slow, ancient, steady enough to sound almost unreal. David. The realization spread through her body instantly. Not thought alone. Awareness. The bond between them pulsed softly beneath her skin now, like something living had settled inside her bloodstream during the night. Warmth moved low through her chest. Need followed immediately after. Not fear, not panic, necessity. Ember opened her eyes slowly. Gray dawn filtered through rain-streaked cemetery windows, turning the bedroom silver blue beneath lingering candlelight. David lay beside her under the dark sheets, one arm curved possessively around her waist, even in sleep, or whatever passed for sleep in creatures like him. His face looked younger like this, not less dangerous, less guarded. Dark hair spilled across the pillow, while one pale hand rested against her stomach as though instinct itself refused distance now. Ember stared at him quietly. The feeding marks along her throat throbbed faintly beneath the sheets. His. The thought arrived naturally, not frightening anymore. God. She should have been horrified by how right it felt. Instead, she shifted closer instinctively. David's eyes opened immediately. Not startled. Aware. Always aware. The moment his gaze found her, relief moved visibly through him. Tiny, quick, gone almost instantly beneath the restraint. But Ember saw it. Interesting. You're here, he murmured softly. The words struck somewhere deep inside her chest. Not because they were romantic, because they sounded uncertain, as though some ancient part of him still expected to wake alone. Ember touched his face gently. Where else would I be? His eyes darkened instantly. The hunger remained there. Always. But quieter now. Not satisfied, anchored. David turned his face slowly into her palm before he could stop himself, and touched her palm gently with his soft lips. The intimacy of that nearly undid her. You slept, he said quietly. So did you. Not exactly. A faint smile touched Ember's mouth. You keep saying cryptic things like that and expecting me not to ask questions. I expect you to ask them. His thumb brushed slowly against her waist beneath the sheets. I simply decide which answers are survivable. The bond pulsed softly again between them. Ember felt it now. His attention, his relief, the low, restless edge of hunger beneath his composure. Not thoughts, presence. And the terrifying thing, her body relaxed around it instinctively. David noticed immediately. Of course he did. You feel calmer near me now, he said quietly. It was not triumph. It sounded almost guilty. Ember looked at the dark marks along her throat, reflected faintly in the rain-lit mirror on the wall across from the bed. Yes. The admission settled heavily between them. Because it was true. She felt safer in the arms of an ancient predator than she ever had in New York. New York. The thought arrived strangely flat now, colorless. The cramped apartment, the condemned building, the endless noise, the loneliness sharp enough to ache inside crowded rooms. It all felt impossibly distant suddenly, like remembering someone else's life. David watched her expression carefully. What are you thinking? That I barely remember what my old life felt like anymore. The words escaped softly. Honest. David went still beside her. Not cold stillness, fear. Ember felt it through the bond instantly. Sharp, immediate. You regret that, he stated. No. The answer came too quickly. David's eyes closed briefly. Relief again? God. She was recognizing how often relief moved through him now whenever she stayed, whenever she chose him again. It devastated her quietly every time. His hand slid upward slowly beneath the sheets, until cold fingertips rested lightly over the marks on her throat. Possessive, protective, sacred. Mine. The feeling echoed faintly across the bond. Ember inhaled softly. David's eyes lifted to hers instantly. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. A silence entered him. Then, "Yes." The word sounded wrecked. The bond deepened in the quiet afterward, not violently, inevitably. David moved closer slowly until his forehead rested against hers once more. The gesture had become instinct between them now. "You are changing," he said quietly. "Because of the bond?" "Yes." Fear should have arrived harder than it did. Instead, she felt curiosity, warmth, a terrible aching desire to move even closer. "How?" David hesitated. That alone frightened her more than immediate honesty would have. "You hear me sometimes now," he said carefully. "Not language, instinct, emotion." His fingers tightened faintly against her throat. "And your body is beginning to recognize me as necessary." Necessary. That word again. It moved through her with dangerous warmth. "You say that like it's terrifying." "It is." Ember searched his face carefully. "Because of what it's doing to me?" "No." The answer came instantly. "Then why?" David's expression changed. The immortal mask finally cracked completely there. No elegance now, no careful distance, only devastating truth. "Because if I lose you now," he said quietly, "I will not survive it." The room fell still. Rain against glass, candles burning low, an ancient vampire looking at her with the kind of naked emotional ruin that could level kingdoms. Ember's chest tightened painfully. "You don't mean emotionally?" "No." The word barely existed, and suddenly she understood. Not metaphor, not romance exaggerated into poetry, literal. The bond had reached so deeply into him that separation itself had become lethal. God. David looked away first. As though ashamed, she now knew the scale of what he had allowed himself to become around her. "I should never have let this happen." Ember touched his face immediately. His eyes closed with visible relief at the contact. "But you did." "Yes." "And if you could undo it?" Silence. Long enough for the sound of rain to fill the room completely. Then David looked at her again. "No, I wouldn't." The honesty shattered her. Ember kissed him softly. Not hunger now, not desperation. Love. The realization arrived quiet and absolute between heartbeats. She loved him. The monster, the hunger, the terrifying devotion, all of him. David's hands tightened instantly against her body, as though the bond itself had heard the realization. Perhaps it had. A knock sounded suddenly through the apartment. David froze. Annoyance moved sharply through the bond. Interesting. Another knock followed, more impatient this time. "David?" Adrian's voice called faintly through the apartment. "You've become socially alarming." Ember laughed softly before she could stop herself. David looked deeply unamused. That reaction encourages him. I think he'd continue regardless. "Yes." Another voice followed this time. Lucian, more serious. "We need to speak with you." David's jaw tightened visibly. The possessive arm around Ember did not loosen. Interesting again. "You don't want me out there," she said quietly. "No." "Why?" His eyes darkened. "Because they will smell the bond immediately." Heat rose beneath her skin. Not embarrassment. Something warmer, more dangerous. Mine. The feeling pulsed faintly through the connection again. David closed his eyes briefly, as if he heard it too. God help me, he whispered. The words sounded almost overwhelmed. Ember touched the feeding mark on her throat lightly. It's already irreversible, isn't it? A terrible silence entered him. Then, almost. The word landed heavily between them. Another knock. Adrian again. Lucian is trying to behave responsibly, and frankly, it's upsetting everyone. David exhaled slowly through his nose, then looked back at Ember with visible reluctance. I need to speak to them. Then go. His hand tightened immediately around her waist. No. The answer came instinctively, possessively. Ember stared at him. David seemed to realize what he had said only afterward. A shadow crossed his expression. This is what I mean, he said quietly. The bond changes instinct before thought. Ember's pulse fluttered hard enough that his gaze dropped automatically toward her throat. God. Everything between them had become instinct now. David touched her face gently, then even more carefully. You still have a choice. The words entered the room with enormous weight. Not manipulation, not coercion, choice. Always a choice. If you want your old life back, he whispered, I will let you go before the bond finishes becoming permanent. New York flashed briefly through Ember's mind again. Subways, concrete, loneliness, colorless mornings. Then David beside rain-lit windows, vinyl at midnight, cold hands trembling against her skin. A heartbeat ancient enough to outlive empires, softening whenever she stayed. Real. He felt real. Everything before him felt pale by comparison now. Ember looked at the vampire, who loved her enough to offer freedom while visibly breaking apart at the thought of losing her. Then she reached slowly for his hand and intertwined their fingers. Not answer yet. Promise. David stared at their joined hands as if they terrified him more than fire ever could. And through the bond between them, Ember felt the truth moving violently beneath all his restraint. Hope.
You intertwine your fingers with mine instead of answering it immediately. Beautiful girl, do you understand what hope feels like to something ancient, violent, jarring? I offer you freedom because I love you enough to fear what staying beside me will eventually cost. And still, you hold my hand tighter. The bond pulses wildly between us after that. Not hunger now, not appetite. Hope. God. I had forgotten how dangerous hope could become. You lie beside me, beneath rain light and black silk, with feeding marks blooming dark along your throat, and somehow you still look at me, as though I am something capable of gentleness. You should not. You know what I am now. What I hunger for. What I become when restraint fractures beneath the sound of your pulse. And still your body relaxes when I touch you. That devastates me quietly every time. You say New York feels unreal now. Colorless. I hear the truth beneath the words immediately. You are already leaving your old life behind in ways neither of us can undo. I should be your protector, not your downfall. Part of me should want to stop this. Part of me should carry you out of Marceau House before the bond roots itself so deeply into your soul that separation becomes impossible. Instead, I listen to your heartbeat slow beside mine and feel relief move through my body like a prayer finally answered. Monster. The word should shame me more than it does, because when I tell you I will not survive losing you, you do not recoil. You touch my face. Merciful girl. No one has ever answered my hunger with mercy before. Adrian knocks at the door. Lucienne waits in the hall. They smell eternity beginning between us already. And the worst part, they are right to worry, because when I tell you that you still have a choice, I realize something catastrophic beneath the fear and devotion and impossible hope inside me. If you leave now, I will let you go. But if you stay, I will love you with all the terrible permanence of something that has already survived death once before.
Chapter 17. Eternal Bride. The storm arrived just after midnight, not ordinary rain, a cathedral storm. Thunder rolled over New Orleans in long, mournful waves, while lightning silvered the cemetery into something ancient and unreal beyond the windows of Marceau House. Candles burned throughout David's apartment, dozens of them. Gold flames flickered against black walls and velvet shadows, while vinyl turned softly near the bay windows like the pulse of something waiting. Ember stood at the cemetery window, wearing one of David's black shirts, nothing beneath it. The fabric hung loose against her thighs, while rain painted silver trails down the windows beyond her reflection. The bond pulsed steadily beneath her skin now. David, need, hunger, love, all of it intertwined so completely that she no longer knew where one ended and the other began. And terrifyingly, she did not want separation anymore. Behind her, David stood motionless near the bedroom doorway, watching, not politely, never politely now. He stood shirtless, exposing pale skin marked faintly by her mouth from earlier nights. His hair fell loose around his face, while stormlight flashed silver across the sharp lines of his expression. Ancient vampire, a beautiful monster, her David. The realization moved through her with devastating certainty. Mine. The word echoed faintly back through the bond. David closed his eyes briefly. God. Ember felt the reaction move through him like pain and worship tangled together. You hear it constantly now, he said quietly. She turned slowly towards him. Yes. His gaze lowered instantly to the marks along her throat. Hunger sharpened visibly across his face, but beneath it, fear. Not fear of himself anymore, fear of losing her. Ember crossed the room toward him deliberately. Every step felt ceremonial somehow, like the apartment had already become altar and grave, and sanctuary all at once. David watched her approach with visible strain beneath his stillness. You should still understand what this means, he murmured softly. I do. No, he said. You understand love. You understand desire. His jaw tightened faintly. This is something older. Lightning flashed hard beyond the cemetery windows. The apartment glowed white for one brief, violent second. David's eyes darkened completely. If you choose this fully, he said quietly, you will belong to me in ways neither of us can undo. The words should have sounded monstrous. Instead, they sounded terrified. Ember stopped directly before him, close enough to feel cold drifting from his skin, close enough to hear the ancient heartbeat beneath the silence. You say that like it's a curse. His hand lifted slowly toward her throat. Reverent again, always reverent when he touched her now. It could become one, but you would never let it. The certainty in her voice visibly shattered something inside him. David's fingers trembled faintly against her skin. God, even now, even here, he still feared hurting her more than losing himself. Ember touched his face gently. You gave me a choice. Yes, I'm making it. The room went perfectly still. Rain hammered the windows. Candles flickered low. The bond between them tightened sharply beneath skin and blood and hunger. David stared at her with devastating openness. Not predator now, not an immortal creature wrapped in elegance and restraint, only a man standing at the edge of eternity, waiting to see if she would walk into it willingly. Ember kissed him first, softly, then deeper when his hands closed around her waist with immediate desperate reverence. The storm outside intensified. Thunder rolled through the cemetery, while David kissed her like a whispered prayer, turning physical beneath candlelight. No restraint remained now, not because he lost control, because she had asked him not to hold back. The distinction mattered. His mouth moved from hers down the line of her throat slowly, kissing every feeding mark already blooming there, as though memorizing devotion directly into her skin. Ember's fingers tangled hard in his hair. David shuddered violently. The reaction moved through the bond instantly. Need, love, hunger, fear, mine. The word echoed stronger now, openly. Ember gasped softly. David froze, then slowly lifted his eyes to hers, dark, ancient, ruined with love. Mine, he said aloud. No restraint this time, no hesitation. The word entered her body like blood and lightning and vow all at once. Not ownership alone, attention, claim, forever. And Ember realized with devastating clarity that she'd been waiting to hear him say it openly since the night she first crossed his threshold. She touched his face carefully, then whispered, "Yes." The answer nearly destroyed him. The bond surged violently between them. Ember felt it instantly, his hunger opening fully, his devotion flooding toward her, centuries of loneliness collapsing inward around one impossible living heartbeat. David kissed her again, with enough force to drive her backward toward the bedroom. Candles flickered wildly in their wake. The room beyond glowed gold and crimson beneath stormlight spilling through stained glass cemetery windows. The black silk sheets weighted undone beneath them like dark water. David lifted her effortlessly into his arms. Ember wrapped herself around him instinctively. No fear now, no hesitation, only surrender chosen fully and consciously. His mouth returned repeatedly to her throat while he laid her carefully against the bed, kissing, breathing, worshipping. The bond pulsed harder every time his mouth touched her skin. Ember felt him inside her constantly now, the ache of his hunger, the terrible tenderness beneath it, the overwhelming relief whenever she stayed close. David stared down at her as if something sacred had finally chosen to love him back. "You are certain?" he whispered. The question sounded wrecked, not because he doubted her, because he desperately wanted to believe her. Ember reached for him immediately. Yes. The answer moved visibly through him, relief so profound it almost resembled grief. Then the hunger rose again. Beautiful, terrifying, ancient. David removed the black shirt from her body slowly, not hurried, ceremonial. His eyes followed every inch of revealed skin with devastating intensity, while stormlight and candle fire painted gold across her naked body. Ember should have felt exposed. Instead, she felt chosen, desired completely. David's hands moved over her, as if devotion had finally become unbearable to contain physically. Every touch reverent, every kiss ruinously intimate. He kissed down her throat again, then lower. Ember's breathing broke softly beneath him as the bond sharpened every sensation until touch itself became overwhelming. David felt everything too. She knew because it flooded back through their connection, her pulse affecting him, her sounds undoing him, her body becoming instinctively necessary to his own. The intimacy of that nearly shattered her. "David," she whispered. His eyes lifted instantly, always answering, "I want all of you." The confession wrecked him visibly. Not lust alone, emotion. Ancient, starving emotion. "You already have me," he said softly. "No." Ember touched his face carefully. "All of you." The hunger inside him surged violently. Then slowly, carefully, David bared his fangs fully for the first time. No shadows hiding them now, no restraint disguising the monster. Beautiful. God. Ember's entire body reacted instantly with heat and trembling want. David saw it. The devastation moving across his face nearly broke her heart. "You desire this," he whispered. Not arrogance, wonder. Ember reached for him and guided his mouth back toward her throat willingly. "Yes, I desire you. I love all of you." The bond flared, almost painfully bright between them. David made a ruined sound low in his chest before feeding from her throat deeply. Not violent, ceremonial. The ache bloomed instantly beneath his mouth, while warmth flooded through Ember's bloodstream hard enough to arch her body beneath him. David held her tightly against him as hunger and devotion and ancient grief poured through the bond together. Ember felt everything, his loneliness, his terror, his unbearable love. "Mine?" The word thundered through her again, and this time she answered through the bond itself. "Yours." David broke apart. The reaction slammed through him so violently that the room trembled. Candles extinguished one by one around the bedroom. Darkness rushed inward. Only stormlight remained now. Silver across black silk, rain across cemetery glass, an ancient vampire shaking in the arms of the woman who had chosen him forever. David pulled back from her throat, breathing unevenly. Blood darkened his mouth beautifully. Ember reached up instinctively and touched it with trembling fingers, then brought them slowly to her own lips. David stared at her like worship had become agony. "Ember," warning, prayer, love. She kissed him before he could stop her, and when their mouths met again, the bond opened fully, not turning, not death. Something stranger, more intimate. Their heartbeats synchronized briefly beneath the storm, one living, one ancient, then slower, closer, together. The room blurred violently around Ember as sensation flooded every nerve beneath her skin. David, rain, candles, blood, love, forever. She felt centuries brush against her consciousness like dark wings passing through cathedral shadows. Not memories fully. Him. Ancient hunger finally finding peace. David held her against him while the storm raged around Marceau House, and dawn waited helplessly somewhere beyond the rain-heavy sky. And for the first time in centuries, the monster was no longer lonely.
You choose me consciously, beautiful girl. That is the thing that undoes me completely. Not your blood, not your body, not even your love. Choice. You stand before something ancient and starving and terrible. And when I warn you what forever means, you answer by stepping closer. No one has ever done that before. Not once. I tell you that you will belong to me. The words should sound monstrous, possessive, wrong. Instead, you look at me, like vows are finally being spoken in a language your soul recognizes. Then you say, yes, God. The bond tears fully open inside me. Mine. I say the word aloud because restraint has finally become impossible around the shape of my devotion to you. And you answer willingly. Yours. Beautiful, ruinous girl. Do you understand what you have done to something immortal? You have made eternity gentle. When I feed from your throat tonight, it no longer feels like appetite. It feels sacred. Your heartbeat changes beneath my mouth. Your body opens willingly against mine. The bond floods with love, so overwhelming it nearly brings me to my knees beside you. I feel your fear vanish completely. I feel your surrender become trust instead of helplessness. I feel you choosing forever while rain batters the windows around us, like mourning and blessing intertwined. You touch the blood on my mouth without revulsion. No one has ever done that before either. Not fear, not horror, reverence. You kiss me with my own hunger still between us. And suddenly the centuries inside me stop feeling empty. You call me back from loneliness so completely it hurts. The monster finally becomes peaceful in your arms. And for the first time since death remade me, forever no longer feels like a punishment.
Epilogue. Marceau House. During the seasons, the rain returned often to Marceau House. Some nights it arrived soft as breath against the cemetery windows. Other nights it came cathedral-heavy, drowning the old graves in silver, while thunder rolled over New Orleans like distant morning bells. The building remained unchanged through the years. Candles still flickered behind velvet curtains on the 4th floor. Vinyl still drifted softly through the halls after midnight. White roses still appeared mysteriously beside the cemetery gates every Sunday morning, and occasionally new tenants whispered, mostly about the apartment across the hall, the beautiful couple who never seemed to age, the woman with dark auburn hair who stood at the bay window during storms with candlelight against her skin, the impossibly elegant man always dressed in black beside her. Some tenants swore they never slept. Others claimed the man moved through the building without making a sound, that his eyes reflected strangely in mirrors, that the woman's throat sometimes bore faint marks like shadows of old devotion beneath lace collars and velvet ribbons. Most dismissed the stories quickly. New Orleans encouraged beautiful hauntings. Marceau House simply had 2 more. On storm-heavy evenings, Ember still stood beside the cemetery windows, watching rain gather silver along the crypts below. Decades had passed. The cemetery remained unchanged. Marble angels weathered slowly beneath moss and storm water, while generations of flowers appeared and disappeared across graves forgotten by everyone except the dead. But Ember remained, beautiful, still, unchanged beneath candlelight. The bond pulsed softly beneath her skin now, as naturally as breath once had. Behind her, vinyl turned quietly through the apartment. A cello, low piano, David's favorite records. Ember smiled faintly before he even entered the room. The bond always warned her now. No, not warned. Welcomed. Cold hands settled instinctively at her waist from behind, while David lowered his mouth softly to the mark still visible at her throat after all these years. Reverent, possessive, home. You're thinking too loudly again, he murmured against her skin. Ember leaned back into him immediately. You still eavesdrop? Yes. The answer warmed through her like old velvet and candlelight. David's reflection appeared beside hers in the dark cemetery glass. Ancient vampire, beautiful monster. Still looking at her as if eternity had surprised him by becoming merciful. Ember turned slowly within his arms. You know, she whispered softly, the tenants downstairs think we're ghosts. A faint smile touched David's mouth. They are not entirely wrong. Then he chuckled. I wonder what they make of Adrian below them. She smiled. They find Adrian strange and somewhat terrifying in a theatrical manner. Rain slid slowly down the windows behind them. The apartment glowed gold beneath candlelight, while the cemetery stretched silent and eternal below Marceau House, unchanged like them. David touched her face gently. Still reverent after all this time, still devastating. Any regrets? He asked quietly. The question held no fear any more, only wonder. Ember looked toward the rain-dark cemetery, where white roses rested against the Grant crypt below, then back at the immortal creature who had once stood trembling in candlelight because he feared loving her would destroy them both. Mine. The word moved softly through the bond. Warm now, peaceful. Ember smiled, not one. David kissed her slowly while thunder rolled over the city and vinyl crackled softly through candlelit rooms. Beyond the windows, rain continued falling across the cemetery, like time itself had finally learned how to kneel. And inside Marceau House, love remained immortal. Thank you for listening. If this story left a mark on you, tell a friend. Or 3. And if you have a moment, a review on Amazon helps keep the fire burning for indie authors like me. Your reviews are fuel. Your support is magic. Want to see more? Visit my author page on Amazon at https://www.amazon.com/author/VPNightshade. Check out my YouTube channel to listen to free stories, ASMR scripts, my music, and my poetry. Subscribe and don't forget to like, comment, and share your favorites. https://www.youtube.com/@v.p.nightshade. Enjoy the rest of your evening, my wonderful darlings. Until next time.